Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
Ancelotti and Thomas Tuchel squared off again, with Real coming in with the 3-1 advantage, making them heavy favourites. And in the end, Chelsea came out on top in this match, 3-2 thanks to Mount's Rudiger and Werner, whilst Benzema and Rodrigo scored for Real. But this meant that Real Madrid went through an aggregate 5-4. The XG showed the scoreline was roughly fair, 2.86 to 1.22. But what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a look. And if you want to take your enjoyment of the game up, I'm happy to be working with my fantasy football app of choice yet again, Spitch. Spitch is my favourite fantasy football app, as not only can you play for free and still win cash prizes, the scoring system is much more interesting. It's not just goals and assists, so players also get points for passes, tackles and interceptions, meaning that all 11 players are crucial. Even better, Spitch's overall scores and prizes reset each week. So, if you join today for example, this week you have as much chance of winning a prize as anyone who started playing on match day 1. So, download Spitch for absolutely free through the link in the description below to give it a go, and to help support the channel. Also join the FMS EPL community on Spitch, link down below, and I'll shout out the best performers. Currently it's UK and Ireland only, 18 years old and up, and you need ID to fully register. Let's start with Chelsea on the ball, as they had more of it. Chelsea's shape was extremely fluid in all phases, but they generally looked to begin short. And initially, when Chelsea could look like they had a standard 4-3-3, life could be easier for the Madrid midfield to go man-to-man. But Chelsea rarely stuck to this shape, and it would often shift to something like a back 3, with Alonso and Loftus-Cheek providing all the width, and Kovacic and Conte as the double pivot to provide the platform for all the attackers to push forward. And at times Real defended in a lopsided shape, with Vinicius ready to press and transition into the space. So not only did this shape give Chelsea the man advantage in the build-up, but compared to the first leg, in Reece James, Chelsea had a pacier man ready to take on Vinicius in 1v1 duels and on the transition. In fact, James ended with a game-high 9 tackles and interceptions. The Benzema goal is actually a perfect representation of one of the few times where James was caught out. James is high and out of position during a possession phase, and Real win the ball back and Vinicius is still high, providing Benzema support. So, when the ball comes to Vinicius, James isn't there to confront him, and instead Thiago Silva is dragged out of position. So now Rudiger is 2 versus 1 down in the box, and his slip allows the momentary space for the goal. And higher up, when Chelsea were looking to have a front 5 with Werner, Mount, Havertz and Loftus-Cheek constantly rotating, Valverde was always willing to drop in to allow Real to have a back 5 and a man-to-man scenario at the back. And early on, Casemiro would look to drop in at times to make it a back 6 so that they would have the man advantage. But in these situations, Chelsea found great benefits in not having a traditional defender as their wingback. This is because, with the Real midfielders often occupied by Conte and Kovacic, Loftus-Cheek could drift into this half space behind them to look to receive. And as discussed, the rest of the Chelsea forward line was fluid, so Werner or Havertz could pull into this region to discourage a defender from pushing up onto Loftus-Cheek. As a result, Loftus-Cheek could often receive in this region and look to drive forward and try and cause chaos. So Casemiro quickly returned to his more orthodox defensive midfield position, but Chelsea still had ways to look for the overload. Both Mount and Loftus-Cheek are comfortable centrally, so would drift in to create dual 10s so that the midfield looked more like a box and they'll technically have a 4 versus 3. With Werner and Havertz ahead of them, both willing to drift wide and go central, if a Real defender hopped the line to try and create pressure against the midfield, it could leave room for them to attack. We see a bit of this in the Werner goal. Chelsea have a front 5 with Mount and Loftus-Cheek as dual 10s. The forward, in this case Alonso, drops deep, and the fluidity of Chelsea's front men means that now Mount and Werner rotate effortlessly. Nacho follows the forward deep, creating space for Werner to then be found and eventually score. But how about Madrid when they're on the ball? From the goal kick, Madrid looked to play short by dropping both centre-backs deep. However, Chelsea were determined to press from the outset, switching to a 3-2-3-2, so the two forwards were ready to press the centre-backs, and in addition, the deepest pivot was covered, and so were the wide men if necessary. So Thibaut Courtois was often forced long. And in open play, Tuchel's defensive setup was just as strong and fluid as his offensive one. The side lined up in a 4-3-1-2, which allowed them to keep pressure high. Werner and Havertz could pressure the centre-backs, with Mount stopping Casemiro from the outlet. Tuchel took lessons from the first leg, where when Carvajal pushed high and Valverde inverted, Real had the overload in midfield. But this wasn't the case, as now with 3 men in the second line, Chelsea could prevent this overload more easily. But on the attack, the dual role of Loftus-Cheek was crucial. From this inside position, he had to track midfielders when the ball was central or out on the left. But if Ferland Mendy ever received the ball, it was up to Loftus-Cheek and his athleticism to spring out and apply pressure quickly whilst the rest of the midfield shifted across. But when Real had success on the ball, it is because they were able to use the wide regions before Chelsea were able to shift across. Down the left, this was often through Kroos dropping deep left and drawing Loftus-Cheek. With Mendy inverting infield higher up, now Vinicius would be able to receive out wide and look to draw a man for a 1-versus-1. Down the right, when Valverde was inverting, it would draw Alonso central and would leave space for the switch. But overall, Chelsea can consider themselves unlucky not to go through, with Tuchel's tactical plan almost perfect for the situation. Real Madrid showed why they're a elite team in this competition though, and will be ready for a semi-final against Atleti or City. But what did you make of the match? Drop it down below. As for the managerial tactical score, I thought Tuchel's game plan was excellent considering the deficit, allowing his side to push forward whilst not overly exposing themselves at the back, so he earns an 8. Ancelotti's side were not at their best and were second best for much of the game, meaning that he only earns a 5. But what are your ratings? Drop them down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out. And a special thanks to my patrons including Adam Keating and Owen Sugg.
But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.